warm welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker in Lagos. And missiles and drones have been launched into Ukraine's airspace as a delegation of African leaders visit the capital Kyiv on a peace mission. Ukraine's military said the capital's air defense system is at work even as explosions were heard in the capital. Delegations from 7 African countries, including South Africa, Egypt and Senegal, are due to meet Ukrainian president to suggest compromises for a peace deal. They are due to visit St. Petersburg tomorrow. A little earlier, the African leaders began their visit by going to the site of the mass grave in the town of Bucha, which lies just outside of Kyiv. Bucha is where Ukraine says Russian occupiers carried out executions, rapes and torture, and where international investigators have been collecting evidence of war crimes. Russia denies the allegations. According to a draft framework document, the peace mission could propose a series of confidence-building measures during initial efforts at mediation. The document says the objective of the mission is to promote peace and encourage the parties to agree to a diplomacy-led process. Those measures could include a pullback of Russian troops, removal of Russian tactical nuclear weapons from Belarus, the suspension of implementation of an international criminal court arrest warrant targeting Putin, and relief from the Western sanctions imposed on Russia. Kyiv says its own peace initiative, which envisages the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukrainian land, must be the basis for any settlement of the war. In the meantime, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa arrived at the war-torn Kyiv this morning as part of the peace mission by a delegation of African leaders hoping to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. The African delegation is expected to meet Ukrainian president and then hold talks with Russian president in St. Petersburg on Saturday. And we mentioned that the delegation of African leaders tore the wreckage of Russian vehicles in central Kyiv during that mission. South African president and heads of state from Zambia, the Comoros, Egypt, Senegal, they arrived today. The delegation also took photographs of military vehicles on display amidst tight security in the Ukrainian capital. VOA's Anna Chernikova joins me now for more. Hi, Anna. What more can you tell us about the tour of African leaders?
Good evening. Today the city of Kyiv woke up with the news that African delegation is in Kyiv actually already, and the central part of the city was blocked for this reason. So in terms of traffic, it was really high security measures involved. What we know for the moment that the leaders visited Bucha. The leaders, for the moment, we don't have confirmation if they have already met President Zelensky or they're still probably holding meetings, but they are, so they're supposed to meet President Zelensky and other Ukrainian officials. What also is interesting with this trip, that during this trip, Russian forces arranged another attack on the capital. It was quite a big attack. Ukrainian Air Force reports that 6 Kinjal ballistic missiles were destroyed in the city, in the sky of the capital and Kyiv region. Also 6 cruise missiles calibers were destroyed and 2 intelligence drones. So the air raid alarm was on at around 11 o'clock in the morning, local time, and it lasted for a couple of hours. As we know, African delegation was hiding in Bucha. They were in Bucha at that moment, and they were hiding in the bomb shelter. This was reported by Ukrainian officials.
And that has been received, around the world. A lot of people are wondering, how that happened, because we all know, including Russia, that the African leaders were due to visit today. Perhaps the question I should also ask is, what exactly are they hoping to achieve with this visit?
Well, according to what we know at this point, this is a peace mission, and African leaders will hold talks with Ukrainian officials, with Russian officials, and propose certain. And they have certain suggestions to propose, apparently, to possible peace deal. But again, and in general, not the deal itself, but just peace outcome of this war. And as was announced, African countries are ready to help in that, and this is the main reason for this trip. Also, we know that apparently they will also talk regarding the prolongation of grain deal, because we're hearing again that Russia they're hesitating if they are going to prolong it or not. So at this point, there is no one can be sure that Russian side would prolong the deal, and it looks like that this would be also one of the questions to discuss and to negotiate. But in general, well, it's good that African leaders are visiting Ukraine to see on their own what's happening, and to talk to Ukrainian officials, to listen to the position of Ukrainian officials, and to the official position on future peace deal as well. So we might get more details, of course, after the press conference is held in Kyiv. But for the moment, this is what we have.
We have a number of perhaps reports that have suggested there is some sort of battle for Africa, and this is between Ukrainian president and Russian president, because many wonder what leverage the African leaders who are visiting have in terms of money, in terms of nuclear power, in terms of even arms and ammunition, which Ukraine is getting from Western allies. And perhaps another benefit, maybe one could think of, is the black grain deal, where they hope to get wheat, and that's wheat coming into Africa.
Well, definitely, it's African region is very important for diplomatic relations for both countries, both Russia and Ukraine. And Ukraine is, as we can recently see, is trying to deeper this cooperation and relations in general. It was a tour by the Minister of Foreign Affairs to African countries. At the same time, we see the same actions from Russian officials, and yeah, you are absolutely right saying that this is an important region for both. Well, it's also important, for the understanding, for the understanding of these countries, of what's happening in Ukraine, on the war, which is going on, and the reasons why grain deal is needed, and why grain deal is in place. So because before it was no problem with getting any grains from Ukraine, and Ukraine is one of the main exporter of those. So definitely, grain deal would be one of the crucial topics, because this is, of course, this affects African countries extremely much. So let's see what the press conference will bring us, and what Ukrainian officials and African leaders will announce, and which statements would be made.
Also, Anna, is there a nuclear threat in Zaporizhzhia? We understand the UN nuclear chief has been visiting and inspecting it.
Well, yes, Mr. Grossi has arrived to the nuclear power plant, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. First of all, this trip was arranged due to the fact that Kakhovka Dam was destroyed, and we know that Kakhovka Dam, so it was not only the dam itself, but also hydroelectric station, and also it was this reservoir, a special reservoir, water reservoir for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, for all the nuclear blocks to cool down. So this water, particularly this reservoir with water, is needed for the plant to be able to cool down its nuclear blocks. And basically, this was the main reason for inspection. At least this happened right after the catastrophe, after this tragic catastrophe at Kakhovka Dam, after the explosion and destruction of the dam. And for the moment, as we hear from both Ukrainian energy officials and from International Atomic Energy Agency, that the risks, the direct risks, let's separate, let's put it this way, the direct risks for the plant are not visible. So for the moment, it's enough water capacities, and it's only one block which is still operating. The rest are not operating, and this block which is operating is not operating in full capacity. And there is still enough water, and there are possibly alternative ways of getting water for cooling system in this reservoir. But this is if we talk about the direct impact, and this is what if we talk about the risks right now. But if we look long term, of course, this is a great risk, and it is a great problem that should be somehow decided, because it will not be enough water due to the no reservoir at all, and it should be alternative ways of getting water there. And Atomic Energy Agency has to, at this point, to deal with this, because the plant is under Russian control, it's occupied, and Ukrainian authorities have no access to it.
And there are quite a number of risks, and that's when you look at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. But you also mentioned the dam, the Kakhovka Dam. There's also the environmental threat. We understand that about 700,000 people are affected. They're calling it a sort of ecocide, as they do not have access to clean water.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is how it's called, and this was also officially called like that by President Zelensky on the first day, I think, of the catastrophe, as far as I remember. But this is understandable, because drinking water is now the problem for the whole region. Technical water is a huge problem as well for the whole region. And we should understand also that Kakhovka Dam is not the only dam on the Dnieper River. So there is an infrastructure of different dams. One is located in Kyiv, others located in other areas along Dnieper River. And all of that is affected. Energy system is affected because, for instance, certain dams, they have now to close all their basically all this filters and holes, because they have to, in order to not let water level go up in different areas. So, and this affects energy system. So this is a huge effect, and if we wait, I think, for some time to check to get this update and in general conclusions from experts, it will be quite an interesting picture coming up, because it is in fact affecting the whole, very different areas. The same as agricultural area, because this area, the Kherson region, was one of the main agricultural areas in Ukraine, and with no water in the reservoir without Kakhovka Dam, it will be extremely difficult to maintain all the fields and so on and so forth.
Anna, thanks for your reporting, and do continue to stay safe.
Thank you.
Well, staying in this invasion, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is hoping for a positive outcome from Russian President Vladimir Putin's planned talks with African leaders on the future of a deal allowing the safe Black Sea export of grain from Ukraine. Senegal's President Macky Sall and South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa are heading a delegation including other African leaders, as well as Egypt's Prime Minister, who are already in Kyiv.
Of course, I hope that in the conversations between President Putin and the African leaders, there is a positive outcome in relation to the Black Sea Initiative, as well as in relation to the efforts that we are making for the exports of Russian food and fertilizers. It's not for me to define what they will achieve. I think it's important to underline that this is an important initiative based on the goodwill of a number of meaningful countries.
Well, to that visit by the UN Atomic Energy Agency head, Rafael Grossi, he says there is enough water available at Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant at the moment, following last week's devastating breach in the Kakhovka dam downstream on the Dnipro River. Mr. Grossi, chief of the International Atomic Energy Agency, who was inspecting the state of Europe's largest nuclear power plant, said the facility was unlikely to return to full power in the current situation. He added that measures are being taken to stabilize the situation, and also said that the IAEA inspectors would remain at the site.
There is sufficient water at the moment, which does not require, in principle, this function. And the plant will decide if that moment comes, whether they do it. That, of course, is a function of the levels of water and other factors. And we will be following that as well. At the same time, there are measures that are being taken to stabilize the situation. Well, this is a decision, of course, for the management. What I would say is that in the current circumstances, with ongoing hostilities, and in particular at this point when there is talk of counter-offensives and more military action around here, my impression is that there are no plans to restart it at full power, full regime again. But I hope this will happen at some time, and it's something that we will be discussing with the management. And the supply of external power is also essential for the safety of the plant, which is now depending on one single line. Before, we are not here talking about a treaty or a convention or a legal agreement. What we have is 5 basic principles. Don't attack the plant, don't attack from the plant, don't make the plant a military basis, don't cut the external power supply, etc., etc. So these things are things that must be done. No, I think I've learned a lot. I needed to see with my own eyes what the situation is. There were some contradicting information and views as to the level of the water, what was being done. So I could speak with the management here. They explained to me what they plan to do, what they are planning to do. It seems sensible. So we are going to be continuing. As I say, here it's not like a snapshot and I go and it's forgotten. We continue working every day. I have my people here. They talk to the management. They receive answers, and I think this is the only way.
So the situation is serious, but the cooling water is sufficient. And Russia has again told the United Nations Security Council that it wants an international investigation into explosions last September on the Nord Stream gas pipelines connecting Russia and Germany that spewed gas into the Baltic Sea. Russia has said the West was behind the blast. Western governments have denied involvement, as has Ukraine, which is fighting Russian forces that invaded February 2022. Russia failed in March to get the UN Security Council to ask for an independent inquiry. Only Russia, China and Brazil voted in favor of the Russian drafted text, while the remaining 12 council members abstained. The pipeline blasts occurred in the exclusive economic zones of Sweden and Denmark. Sweden and Denmark and also Germany have said that their own separate investigations were still active and Russia had been informed.
Dear colleagues, I just wanted to inform you that we have raised in any other business the question of investigation of the sabotage of Nord Stream 1 and 2, and we draw attention of our colleagues in the Security Council to the fact that the so-called national investigations conducted by Sweden, Germany and Denmark are not moving forward. In fact, what we see is just moving around in circles. We stressed that this situation is absolutely intolerable for my country, that my country will do its best to pursue this cause, and we will seek international investigation and punishment of those who are behind this crime. We think that this is absolutely inadmissible, that perpetrators of such heinous crime, which directly affects international peace and security, are not yet identified and prosecuted. That was.
Sorry, you said you'll seek an international investigation. Does that mean, are you planning to put forward a UN resolution to do this? How will you do that?
We recall the recent vote in the Security Council when 12 of our colleagues abstained. So we are now thinking about how we would pursue this course. Nothing is excluded in this regard. We just